This week we have a candidate who is seeking we'll call it a go-to-market strategy role within tech. They're an executive level MBA type, seeking a more strategy level role. Okay, fine. And the leadership principle that we are targeting is think big. And the question that was asked was, tell me about a time that you had to develop a product or business model from scratch, or when you dramatically changed one in a turnaround situation. You can think about this question as being asked specifically to target their ability to think strategically and walk through a process for how they kind of took something that was clearly failing and made the case for we can make it not fail, and here's how, and here's the resources we need, and here's what we need to go do and execute. So let's see if the candidate was able to do that. I do want to give you the TLDR version of the interview where I'm going to read to you the feedback I would have read into the room had I been an interviewer on this candidate's loop. And here's what I wrote. From a content point of view, this was the first and only real miss of the interview for the candidate. The main issue at hand is that the candidate did not truly demonstrate think big in this answer block. The candidate walked through a situation which definitely answered the question. It was a turnaround, but the answer was very predictable and almost pedestrian in what it presented. No real leaps of logic were on display. This, coupled with a lack of a tie back to a measurable impact to the company, means that this was not quite up to the level of what would be expected for someone with this level of seniority. So again, candidate is a pretty senior person, got an MBA, right? Has had reasonable level of work experience. So they're targeting a very senior role. And the expectation here is that they're going to be able to convince me as the interviewer that they took a thing which was clearly failing. They were able to define success metrics and define a pretty clear why as to why this is important to save or turn around, a process that they're going to put in place for how they're going to make this thing that was failing no longer fail going into the future, and how to kind of measure that over time to make sure that you continue to be successful and when you're going to be successful. These are all things that I would expect from a person at this level to communicate to me within the context of an interview to convince me to hire them based on their content of their interview answer. One final thing. Yes, I just gave you the TLDR, but you can look at the chapters below where you can actually jump through the interview if you want to kind of listen to their actual answer, or if you want to just jump ahead to my content where I'm reading back to you and kind of giving you analysis of what they did and didn't do wrong, so you can maybe take away from that things that you can use in your own interview loop. Go right ahead. Feel free. Trying to make this easier for you as the candidates working your way through this content. And I'm pulling this based on one of the lines off your resume, but you don't have to use that specific one, but it triggered a question I wanted to make sure we talked about, which was just walk me through a time where you either took a product, business model, service, doesn't matter, from using the words, this is what I was keying off of your resume, from 0 to 1, right? From scratch, or alternatively, a dramatic turnaround situation, right? Where it's just a complete train wreck, dumpster fire, and you had to kind of basically resurrect it, which is essentially the same as going from 0 to 1. So let's just start with what was the situation, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So this is I would, so this particular, it won't fit technically into 0 to 1. I think it's more in the category of, the situation was dire, and something needed to be done, and change, and some change needed to be agreed upon, even if the resolution in a short amount of time, even if the resolution could take multiple months. So that's the kind of situation. So this was about 2.5 years ago. Took ownership of an additional product within the portfolio called Multilink. Multilink is essentially a flight tracking tool. So think about every aircraft in the sky emits where they are at any given point in time every few seconds. And we have a technology which essentially is a data
based off transponders or the ABS system?
ADS-B systems as well as transponders. So we have both of those technologies being supported. But essentially inherited that product line, and this enables sort of airlines to get a very data-rich source of where their aircraft are at any given point in time, and they can subscribe to this particular technology. So core technology beneath that is the data fusion engine, and that is the part that sort of correlates and takes multiple observations and provides the best estimate of, or not the estimate, the best with reasonable precision, says, hey, here's where the aircraft is on the planet and the atmosphere. So the challenge here was that the in-house sort of data fusion engine itself was not stable. And just to give you an example, this had, and we reviewed this, and I'll get into it as we go into this particular aspect. There were so many stability issues that there were customer churn was to the, it's a small B2B, a small service within a B2B environment. So 15 to 20% of renewals that we would expect in any given year were just not going through, right? So that was a very dire situation from a business perspective. So much to say we were just losing customers to competition, which in this case was, to a competitor called Sita, which is a company in aircraft communication space as well. So the task here was to elevate the availability of this particular service, understand what's really going on, and kind of put it on a path where where not only the service can be competitive, but we can also be make sure that we have a profitable path to growth over time. So I worked with a 7-member team, from marketing, engineering, sales, product, and customer support to kind of achieve this task and understand what's going on. Number one, so 2 actions. One was to understand the root cause. It's a complex system, so it was kind of easy to go into solution mode, but chose to use a data-driven approach to isolate what was the true root cause of this, to really understand the problem and understand the possible root causes for why this problem was sort of persisting. So one, we understood that the availability, first of all, the availability issue was really an issue, right? Making sure that we understood the extent of that issue as well. So typically the availability for enterprise data services is 5 nines expectation. So you need to be available 99.99% at any given point in time. And that was the expectation of the customer base. And we looked at this particular service called Multilink and said it failed about on average of 8 times a day, which if you just did simple math, that is 87.5% at any given point in time, if not worse.
That's what we that's what we would have called on our teams 8 zeros.
8 zeros. I'll use that somewhere else. But yeah, so 8 failures a day on average. But this was not something that happened one day or 1 month at a time. It was very persistent. So we looked at last 12 weeks, we looked at last 12 months. And the issue was if the data fusion engine did not work and had availability issues, it impacted everything downstream of it, which was the application as this data service was ingested into the customer's sort of front end for them to manage their fleet. So that's where we were able to sort of come in a very data-driven way to say, this truly is the problem, and the extent of the problem was well understood. Rather than opinions guide us, so we let the data tell us where to focus our efforts. The second action was more around debating the potential of making something and buying something. Now, we are not, at Raytheon, our value add is understanding of our customers' operations, which in this case is airlines. We're not so much the experts on data warehousing and data lakes and data fusion. We understand those technologies and the value that they create for our customers, but we're not necessarily the developers of that technology. So at that point, potential solutions were to either pursue a fix to the in-house solution, which was an on-prem sort of developed in the early 2000s solution, or we buy this capability outright from a vendor and look at what that could bring to our portfolio. So within that, I think it was very important early on to define sort of the framework that we would consider before we go into any deeper into the solutions that we had in front of us, whether to buy or to make. And the framework of evaluation that we set up was, one, it has to solve the short-term problem because we are working quarter to quarter, and we want to make sure that we are hitting our financial commitments and our customer satisfaction commitments back into the customer base. Second was the life cycle cost. What is it going to cost us to do if we were to choose to do this differently? What is the net cost and benefit of this? But I think the third part, and this was through discussion, that came out was it's not just about the solving the short term, but and also the life cycle costs being clear and transparent. It was also the long-term sort of return on investment on our focus as an organization. What do I mean by that? I think the idea was, and we quickly came to the conclusion thinking about this, is where is our MO as an organization? Is it really in developing infrastructure and making sure that we can keep refreshing that infrastructure over every few years? Or is it packaging it as a solution for this particular vertical market in aviation, which is our strength, and take that set of solutions to the customer base and drive further innovation in the downstream or end user focused features in the data feeds and then so on and so forth. So that was sort of the explanation of where what we meant as the long term ROI on our focus. So we looked at potential solutions, and we, with that framework, came to the conclusion that it was better to buy this outright from a vendor at a comparable set of commercials. Even a slight increase on lifecycle costs would be acceptable, just because of what we'll be able to get back in terms of engineering capacity that would be freed up from chasing infrastructure issues that can then be repurposed and reallocated to drive further innovation downstream into the end user features, which is where which is what the customer base was expecting, and we knew that that's something that we were struggling to do with the same amount of capital and energy that we had. So while this was a slight increase in cost from buying it from a vendor, in this case we had two vendors that ended up working with us, which was FlightAware, which is if you've ever flown, you track your flights. That's FlightAware data that you probably see on Google, and FlightRadar 24, which is a comparable thing. And essentially, we retired our old data fusion engine, switched to a mix of FlightAware primary and FlightRadar 24 backup to ensure that we had high availability situation for these data feeds. And we transitioned that service. We saved over $1 million a year in labor and subscription costs, and we focused the energy and time back into engineering teams from chasing infrastructure chasing infrastructure issues towards end user innovation, and that has led to since at least in 2021 over $3 million in contract awards, which was at that time about 20% of the revenue that we made as a company. So tremendous increase in our ability and the product's competitiveness to win business, and our competitiveness as a company to close more business in even a pandemic-driven environment, which was very, very cool.
There's a handful of things that you have to do as a candidate, especially the more senior you are, when you're working through an answer. And I think the most important one for this candidate is that there wasn't any sense of scope. The candidate talked a lot about the failure rate. Okay, so that's the stakes. It's bad. Okay, customer churn. Okay, 15 to 20%. But if you've watched any of my videos around the STAR fact format, there's a playlist on the channel that you can go find that walks you through like how to structure your answers using STAR fact format. One of the most important questions you need to answer is what was the problem or issue that you had, but two, why was this important and needed to be solved? And this candidate didn't present number of customers, market sizing, revenue impact, right? The cost, etc. At the outset in terms of outlining the problem and why it needed to be solved. And then further, as I worked through quite a long answer, if I'm being honest, and that we'll talk a little bit more about like how to structure and think about the length of the answer, but within the context of getting to the conclusion, we decided to do X. And we had these three kind of vectors upon which we were evaluating. He didn't actually walk through how that decision was arrived at based on those three vectors. He kind of discusses it as fait accompli, but not like we use these three parts of our framework for evaluating, and here how is this choice is what we made, and here's why, how it maps back to the thing. And so that is somewhat challenging in terms of this answer. The other thing I want to jump in here and just talk about is the length of the answer. And again, I get this question all the time. How long should my answers be? There is no set time. Anyone who tells you 1 minute, 3 minutes, they're wrong. Okay, they're just wrong. Your answer should be exactly as long as it needs to be and not one word longer. And it's kind of a glib answer, but it's true. And the more senior you are, the more you have to say, the longer your answer is going to be. That's just true. However, if you're going to speak for a longer period of time, you had better have good structure. Specifically, the STAR format. STAR fact is what I talk about because it's an FAQ that you can kind of walk through, and here are the important questions you need to answer. If you don't do that and you just talk and talk and talk, and you're not giving me an opportunity as the interviewer to re-engage, I start to lose interest. I start to get bored. My mind starts to wander. I start thinking about the emails I need to answer, the text I got just before this interview, any number of things except focusing on what it is you're saying. And then when I get up and walk out of the room, what's going to happen? I don't remember you. I immediately forget you. And then what does that say about your chances to get the job? So if you're going to talk for a longer period of time, make it engaging. Learn how to do storytelling. Learn how to walk me through a linear progression of that story so it's very clear to me what happened, why, what the stakes were, why it was important, what the impact was, what your role was in all of this, how you arrived at whatever decision, right? The situation, task, the action, the result. Set up that 3-part structure to get me through it. Because if you don't, and you talk for a long period of time, your answer's too long. It's not that it was longer than a minute or longer than 3 minutes. It's just too long because you lacked structure and frankly, you bored me, right? Didn't quite fail that hard here, but he did talk for a very long time and he didn't have great structure and he established a little bit of the stakes, but he didn't establish the scope of the impact. And for a more senior role, super important. Why did you feel so strongly about pursuing this specific issue, given all the things that you could have been working on?
Great question. So one, I think it comes back to what I mentioned earlier. I think from the common theme probably you're going to hear is, and this is probably where I get most of my energy from, is working with customers and identifying the biggest pain points that they are having, whether it is in their operations and are unserved or are being served but not served particularly well. And in this case, it was our product that was not it was serving a need but not serving it particularly well. And I think that's what motivated me to go after it and in chase of growth, because at the end of the day, I feel the team, also at the end of the day, you have to keep growing in order to keep learning and to grow in a way that not only brings financial results, but also brings a lot of learning opportunity or serving new spaces or new use cases in a growing product. So that's something that motivates me, just the curiosity aspect of this on top of chasing growth in general is something from a customer standpoint is something that always drives me.
When evaluating answers from candidates, especially true the more senior you are, did they answer the question? Did they tie back to broader themes within the context of their answer? In this case, there's some good customer obsession on display for sure. But what was missing is any tie back to the company goals, the overall mission, division goals, revenue targets, like anything that helps me understand the why of what this candidate was doing. And you get away with that the more junior you are, but again, this is a pretty senior person. So my expectation is that just like they were sitting down with their CEO or their direct boss, who maybe is a SVP, something like that, right? That they're walking through an answer that the person who's kind of ostensibly managing this person, have a clear understanding of the what, the why, the how, etc. And it's just a little bit of a miss here. It just doesn't come through, and that makes it just a little bit harder to advocate for them given the seniority of the candidate. What do you think was your biggest blind spot as you worked through this specific issue?
Yeah, I think that I would start with, I think it was just the domain or the subject matter of flight tracking. I did not expect it, as a flyer, as a traveler, frequent traveler. You track your flight, you put in your flight number and it's there, right? It's in a matter of seconds. You almost take it for granted. I did not know enough about the technology behind it, and not just the connectivity question you asked me about ADSB versus having very high frequency radio position reports.
Yep.
So that was something that was new to me. So from a domain expertise standpoint, I think that was a big blind spot for me, which I had to depend, which is why I needed the right team, from a marketing perspective, the engineering team to be assembled that could not only understand the problem and define the problem, but also understand and debate the right solutions or potential solutions that we could comparatively rank and analyze together. So that to me was a big, I would say a big blind spot that with the help of the team and the right individuals assembled, I think, I was able to overcome that and learn that. And quite frankly, now I can be half as knowledgeable as them on the subject that they have known for many years and continue to know better than me. But at least, that's something that's contributed to my own learning of this.
when you are working through your interview, you have to seek out every opportunity you can to communicate to the interviewer that you're great at your job, and take advantage of every opportunity they give you to explain to them how great you are at your job. And so this follow-up question, which is asking about a blind spot, is one of those kind of softball gimmies, which is, okay, here's an opportunity for you to reflect upon what you did and tell me what you could have done different, what you could have done better, how you could have improved. And, I just would say that this candidate just kind of whiffed on this one, because at the end of the day, they said they didn't understand how hard flight tracking would be as a domain. Okay. What does that mean, though? How is it hard? How did it make your job difficult? In what ways did that surface? What difficulties did it present? Expand on it. Okay. What else could you have done to remove this blind spot? Looking back on this, what would you have done differently to get spun up faster? Who could you have hired? What research could you have done? What expertise could you have sought? Like, there's so much here in terms of demonstrating that you as a candidate are self-reflective and have the ability to kind of look back on things that you did and kind of expand on how you could have improved it. It demonstrates to me that you're a person who's not just going to do the thing and then when you're done, move on, but that you can look at the things you've done and think about how you could have done them better, right? That's how you show growth. Certainly the more senior the candidate, in which this person was, you want to see that sense of reflection. And I would say that they didn't quite land it here. They kind of identified the space as difficult. Okay, fine. But I don't walk out of the room thinking that this candidate really truly understood how it impacted them and why. It was hard. Okay, but in what way? Right? What could you have done differently? And it's just an opportunity for you as a candidate to shine. That's what this follow-up question was. And you should be looking for these as you kind of work your way through your answers to really present more content to help me as the interviewer envision you in the role and exceeding the expectations of that role and being a long-term success at the company.